Welcome back. It's been a while. It has been about a year since I did my last podcast. And to be honest, I don't know where it's going to go from here. I am back, at least for one episode, this one. But I can't promise that there's going to be more to come. I hope so. But I've had a lot of resistance, which I believe I've already talked about in another episode, a previous episode. And that hasn't gone away. Resistance is a common theme in the life of an artist. And I'm only saying that so you don't get your hopes up. Not that they would be, but just a little disclosure and honesty up front. Yeah, I'm back. I feel called to speak, and so I'm speaking to you here today on this podcast. So if you're listening to this or watching this, thanks for tuning in for what it's worth. Gonna try and keep it simple and to the point. Today, I felt inspired enough to turn the camera on and to press record. So I'm not going to have huge expectations for myself of what this podcast will be. And I hope that you will also mimic that sentiment and just accept me for who I am today and what I offer in this piece of content. I do think I can provide you some value today with some insight on myself as a person and as an artist, and give you some perspective, some unique perspective, because the topic that I'm going to talk about is one that is, I would say, minority of people have experience with. It's not super rare, but I would say that most people have not had experience with what I'm about to talk to. And so let's just get right down to it. Today, we're going to talk about my experience with ayahuasca. Last year, 2023, my fiance and I, Amanda Noel, traveled to the country in South America called Ecuador. And while we were there, we visited a mountain village just outside of the city of Cuenca, and we participated in a 6-day ayahuasca retreat. And the place was called Gaia Sagrada. And it was quite an experience, and I'll tell you all about it. I'm actually going to read an excerpt from my diary, my daily journal, that is basically 3 different entries for a few of the days while we were there at the retreat center, Gaia Sagrada. And I'll probably just talk about it a little bit afterwards to kind of give you a little bit more information, because some of it's kind of weird and vague. So you'll have to bear with me. The wording in this diary is less informative and a little bit more just observational and maybe even poetic at times. So try not to take it too literally. I am a very abstract thinker and can be leaning towards the more emotional side of explaining things, especially when I was in this state. Because although you sober up from ayahuasca within 12 hours of taking your first dose, your mindset shifts somewhat substantially for at least a long period of time, up to a week. So I was definitely speaking from the heart, and I don't know, maybe I should just read it, because I could just delay this and procrastinate and ramble on for hours before actually reading it, but maybe that's all you need. And we are keeping this podcast simple today to avoid any friction. Try not to overthink it. I'm not sure who's even going to listen to this, but I think it's helpful. It's related to the creative process, the creative artistic lifestyle, and I think it is of some value. So that's why I'm going to share it with you today. Also, just a disclaimer and not apologies, because I'm not really sorry about being personal. That's what this podcast is all about: being personal, opening up, being vulnerable with my emotions and my thoughts. And I actually feel very called recently, within the past couple of years even, to um, voice my perspective and to be more vulnerable with the internet, with my community, and to, steamroll through any resistance to sharing my experience, because I think it can be more helpful than harmful, and I need to stop submitting to fear and censoring myself. So I'm not going to be censoring myself. There's some personal things in this journal entry, and you're just going to have to deal with it. So this is your warning. Sexual content, obviously illicit substance content. I don't believe that ayahuasca or DMT is legal in the United States of America. It is in Ecuador, for the record, and that's where I consumed these substances. I don't see them as drugs. I see them as medicine, which is how the indigenous people also view them. And if you're wondering why I'm holding this paintbrush to my mouth, it's because there's a microphone on the back of it. Some resistance that I experienced when setting up this recording is that my podcast slash voiceover microphone that's directly hooked up to my computer was not functioning properly. My second monitor was not functioning properly. Maybe I should have taken that as a sign to not do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. So, because here we are. But yeah, let's just get right into it. The date is 3/6/23, so March 6th of 2023. This is last year, over a year ago. Right now, it's August of 2024 as I'm recording this podcast. And this is right smack dab in the middle of our 3-month journey throughout Ecuador. Let me just get a drink of water real quick. Hold on, sorry. Sorry, my mouth is really dry. I think I'm nervous. I don't know why. Here we go. This is the entry. It's pretty long, the first one. The second two are shorter. So the layout, I'm just going to keep delaying this. The layout of this 6-day retreat is, it was kind of like a 7-day retreat. We had the option the first night we arrived to do a bonus ceremony, but I decided not to. I decided to wait and get settled in so that I wouldn't be rushing. I figured I would have enough chance to experience this for what it was. Excuse me, I just ate. And so there's 2 ayahuasca ceremonies and 1 San Pedro ceremony in between. And it was basically every other night there would be a ceremony. So night 2, the day after we arrived, was our first ayahuasca ceremony. And that is what this first excerpt is from. I am describing that. Okay, so here we go. Ayahuasca. Last night we had our first journey. I was a bit delayed. Felt like I was the last one to go under. Some purged fairly quickly, and I felt FOMO, fear of missing out. I ended up at 2.5 cups. I didn't feel much at all after the first. Maybe a tad more sensitive physically, something moving around inside. I impatiently awaited the second, and I took it. This hit my body more. I could feel some growling. No purging, vomit, or shit. Lots of dry toots, yawns, and snot. Very faint nausea, but no sign of imminent vomit. Torn between trying not to and wanting to. Obviously grateful for not. Nothing super cerebral. Kind of like being stoned or low-dosing shrooms. Music was great. Shamans were awesome. Finally, They asked for the last round of medicine. Only 5 of us went. I did a half cup, the third round. Compromise between wanting to push further and having mercy on my body. It was a good choice. There's a car going off in the background. I don't know if you can hear it. Okay, there it goes. I'm just going to push through. The half cup was a compromise between wanting to push further and having mercy on my body. It was a good choice. Best for my body long term. Shortly after, about 10 minutes, I made my second trip to the bathroom. I spent a good while each time, but fruitless. Tootful, though. Not sure how long after returning, but I finally had an impactful purge. Through sobbing. I replayed the hellish scene from daycare. One of my earliest memories. It was traumatic. Daddy dropping me off with strangers. I felt abandoned. I would sob at the window for at least 30 minutes to an hour, hoping he would come back to get me. It felt like prison. I didn't understand why he would leave me. Obviously, I know parents have to work, but I didn't know that back then. Ayahuasca showed me his sacrifice. He didn't want to leave me or cause me pain, but he had to in order to support me and our family. I felt an immense love and understanding for Dale as a person and a man. He did his duty. Certainly not with grace 100% of the time, but he did it. I also thought about what pressures he may also have dealt with growing up, being the only son with all sisters. He was default the favorite child in a way. That must lead to genetic stress that I carry too, which is amplified by our nuclear family dynamic. I want to tell my sister and mother that they should try to show more gratitude for what he has provided us all. He is the hero of our family. It has been easy for me to connect to the women in my family. I consider our Nana and Grandma the pillars of our families. Matriarchies. Another belch. One more. Okay. I have taken my father for granted. Not entirely, because I often tell my mother to give him some slack and remind her of his virtues. But this is another level. Maybe I have resented Daddy for not explicitly teaching me how to be a man, but ayahuasca showed me through him. Mostly in things he didn't do, his discipline. The mood of the ceremony was very discipline-centric for me, and masculine. I feel like I have regained a sense of my own masculine energy. I am releasing my insecurities and feminine tendencies to avoid things. Instead, I will move toward my objective. When I'm distracted, focus. The fire was the focal point. The flames sent flares at the edge of my vision, and most things took on a gaseous appearance, like the smoke and flames around the logs. I could see this in people's faces and bodies too, like ghost auras. They would play tricks on me and seem like people were looking at me and reacting. This was Pocky Pachimama's test. I resisted the distraction by focusing harder on the flame. My reward was subtle but distinct visual symbols in the logs and flames. Most were reptilian faces, especially snake. I had an understanding that the snake is a symbol of focus, an essential, single-minded movement toward a goal. Not having arms, just one long piece, one long journey. Life maybe has multiple facets, but keep the vision clear and manage time and attention in a disciplined way that revolves around whether or not any given action or thought serves your mission. I take the sigil of the flaming cobra, maybe with a lion headdress. The fire represents the grandfather flame, and also the randomness, spontaneity, and chaos of feminine energy. A true virtue of manhood is maintaining temperance, prudence, patience, tenderness, and focus with women, particularly his partner. I also had intense pareidolia across the board, which continued long after the ceremony ended. I was one of the last ones there, and maybe the only one to watch the flame burn out. Embers when I left. Ironic because I asked to be the first. My trip started more than halfway through majority of the groups. I felt very much like they were my tribe. Amanda says she felt motherly toward everyone else, and I will make her a mother. Turn the page. In just under 5 years. I will make her a mother in just under 5 years. I will honor my father by giving him grandchildren. Amanda receives visions, inspirations about snakes when we started dating. I am the burning serpent, and I will put my python inside of her and plant the seeds for our family oak to grow in her fertile, nutritious womb. Our family will connect and strengthen the ancestors, and our tribe will give me strength and purpose in order to fulfill my mission. This is still not 100% clear, but I believe it is more than just visual art. It involves communication, sharing the results of my connection with the other realms. Nature will manifest through me as I co-create life and further our flames. I will create, inspire, motivate, and cause divergent thinking. Philosophic Alexander, the guardian of men. I will reclaim manhood for myself and share with others so they can do the same. I am inspired to evolve my art. I have something unique. I will assert myself when I need to claim space. I will be disciplined in my focus. I will respect others' space. I will change my guilt to gratitude. Thanks, Mama Aya. Thank you, Grandfather Flame. Aho, Alex. So that was the first day. I'm just going to talk in between. There's 3 excerpts, but I'm just going to talk in between so I don't forget stuff. Maybe I don't need to talk in between. Maybe I just need to read it and then see what your feedback is and if you have any questions, I can answer them directly. Because there's a lot of stuff in there that I noticed is super ambiguous and vague and confusing. So let me think about what I can elaborate on. I think one of the key takeaways was, like I said, connecting with my father and perhaps even my father's father. So I am the only son of an only son of an only son. So my grandfather was the only son. My father was the only son, though he had a brother that died a week or 2 into his young baby life. But essentially, he was the only son in the family dynamic, and I think that's what's important. And then I'm the only son. I have 1 sister. And I think that ancestral lineage is important and kind of gives my life context and a little bit of meaning, because we basically are a representation of the masculine force within our own family dynamics. And I don't really have a ton to say about that, but I guess in general throughout my life I have felt like a very feminine man. I've been very in touch with my feminine side. Like I said, it's been easier for me to connect with the women in my life, and it's been challenging to connect with the men in my life, the male figures, the masculine energies. The line of communication between me and my mother is pretty fluid, and I can't say the same about my father. And I don't think that that's anything personal. It's not his fault. I don't blame him. And I don't blame my grandfather either. But I do think it's a lineage thing. I think it's a genetic thing, even a hereditary complex um, that we have to overcome. And I do feel somewhat inspired by this experience to kind of break those chains, break that chain of inability to express emotions to the masculine force in our family. At least to the extent of when I have a son, if I if I will, which I kind of feel like I will. I know that sounds weird and maybe even sexist to some of you, but don't push your fucking views on me. Okay, this is my life. I'm allowed to have visions and manifestations, so I'm not trying to predict the future here. I'm just telling you how I feel. Get your feminist dogma ideology up out this bitch. Okay, let me talk. It's my podcast. Have your own. Sorry, you don't deserve that. And also, I do feel like maybe I can play a role in expanding the communication between me and my own father. Obviously, I think that's going to be harder to do than my own son. Um, and I'm not going to put so much pressure on myself or my father in that regard. But I think in general, one of the biggest takeaways from this first ayahuasca ceremony was that I have had a fear of reproducing. I have had a fear of my inadequacies in my ability to raise children and my ability to dedicate the rest of my life to fatherhood and to, by proxy, sacrifice my own personal desires and goals for the greater good of my family. I just kind of have doubts about my capacity to do that. But ayahuasca reassured me a lot, and not in a logical way, not through explanation, but through feeling. Um, I just felt it in my heart, confidence in my ability. I've never felt so confident in my potential ability to be a good father. And so that's nice. Um, I felt an overwhelming presence of Amanda's energy during this ceremony. We were separated during the ceremony, like we were apart. Basically, the way the ceremony is set up is there's a big fire in the middle of this kind of hut, this basically like kind of pavilion. And there was about 30 participants surrounding the flame in a circle. And you're about, I don't know, 2 feet away from the person next to you. So it was kind of crowded. We were like side by side, laying on these kind of foam pads that were like the size of like, they were smaller than like a twin bed. It was just like almost like one of those fold out mattresses. Um, so there was a lot of people in this circle, and there were 3 shamans. There was the main shaman, Namur was his name, and then there was 2 other shamans. One was like a translator and kind of going around and helping people, individuals throughout the ceremony. He was almost like kind of like the mother role of the ceremony. He was translating everything Namur was saying in the ritual because most of the people there were English speaking, but Namur was, like an indigenous Ecuadorian speaking Spanish. And then there was the kind of the keeper of the flame. I forgot his actual title. Um, so the previous one that I mentioned was Fernando. Fernando was the translator, and Santi, was the keeper of the flame. So there was 3 shamans that were basically coordinating this whole ceremony, and they're awesome. Um, my shamans were really great, and I'm super grateful that I had them. Um, and I even saw myself in Namur when I was having these profound fatherhood visions, like as if he was the father of our miniature tribe here in the circle of the ceremony, and he was kind of fostering all this energy. Like I was literally seeing his energetic vibrations transmit throughout the tribe, if that makes sense. This all sounds super woo-woo, and I totally get that if you don't have any psychedelic experience, but if you had, you probably know exactly what the heck I'm talking about. So I just felt super connected to Namur that day, and I know it wasn't really truly his person. It was whatever spirit, whatever energy was manifesting through his vessel of his body, and transmitting into all the participants, especially myself. And that was pretty magical. What else should I talk about? I was talking about Amanda. So yeah, I was saying how there was probably like 8 or so people in between us. So basically, we were out of each other's line of sight, and we did this intentionally. Like, I didn't want to be next to her because I knew that we were already coming in with sort of an energetic connection, and I didn't want that to interfere with either of our experiences. I wanted us to have our own individual experiences. But despite that, I still felt her energy, and it didn't interfere. It actually strengthened my visions. I just felt a profound sense of gratitude for her. And it was kind of magical because at the end of the ceremony, when everybody had left, like I kind of mentioned, I don't know if you understood that whenever I was reading it, but I was kind of late to the game. Like, it seemed like when I looked around and was looking at people, everybody was kind of in the trip. Everybody was having the experience, and like most of the people there were purging. Purging is a normal part of ayahuasca. It's part of the medicine's ability to move energy through you. So oftentimes you will purge, whether it's negative emotions or sickness or anything. It's very complicated, and I'm not going to know how to explain that in any other way, but oftentimes purging takes the form of vomiting. So everybody has their own little bucket and they're just like vomiting, which is kind of distracting, and maybe what kind of kept me out of my experience and delayed my experience because I was just not able to focus. And I'm not blaming anybody. I take credit for that, and my inability to focus and meditate. And my second ceremony, I did much better at that. But anyway, you either vomit or you shit. A lot of people have to go to the restroom and shit their brains out. And like I mentioned, I didn't experience either of those, just dry toots, which was funny, but also kind of scary because, like, the mantra is don't trust a fart because it could be shit. You know what I mean? If you feel like you have to fart, it could be shit, and you might just shit your pants, and that's not good. That would probably lead to a negative experience. So they encourage you to go to the restroom, and I did. And there's also a bunch of volunteers that are kind of helping you, like when anybody needs to go to the restroom or needs anything. There's a bunch of people that are sober that are kind of just like almost like babysitters for the ceremony, to kind of assist anybody that needs it. So like, you don't have super awesome motor skills when you're under the influence of ayahuasca, which is essentially modified um, DMT, which is dimethyltryptamine. I don't know if that's right. Please fact check that. DMT, the spirit molecule, it's in every living being. It's what releases in your body whenever you're about to die, apparently. Which is great to know after experiencing it, because that's just going to be a fun ride, hopefully. And so that's why the people are there to help you walk to the bathroom so that you don't fall over because your motor skills aren't great. So you're not able to navigate the physical realm that well, but navigating the spiritual realm is much easier in this state, which is kind of the reason to do it. And I'm not going to get into all that here. I'm just going to tell you my experience and kind of what I'm inferring from it. So I felt Amanda's presence. I really saw her as a sacred vessel, and that sounds like objectification, and you might think that's I'm triggering. Here I am triggering the feminists again. Try not to see that as limiting, and try and see it from my perspective of expanding her power in this world. I think there's a narrative going on. This is going to get political for like 2 seconds. I think there's a narrative that is somewhat limiting in itself about women, and like feminism is fighting back against the traditional family dynamic and whatever, and like it's rejecting the notion that women have to be mothers in order to have value in this world. And I don't see it that way. I'm somewhat of a fundamental feminist in that I you know think that honoring, respecting, and propping up the women in your life is of great utility. Um, but I think that that rejection and that kind of response to traditional values is maybe an overstepping, and it goes too far, because truly, for humanity's sake, motherhood should be considered one of the most revered and impactful positions that any human can hold. Not just a woman, any human. Like, to mother a child and to do it well is possibly the greatest value that any human could possibly offer another human. Say what you will about that, that's how I feel. And I think the same goes for fatherhood too. And I think the evidence is clear when you look at absence of fathers in communities. I think the degradation of societies that are fatherless um, is evident. And so I think that we should heed that warning and really lean into those roles in our own lives. And I'm not saying that if you don't father children or if you don't mother children, then that you're not providing value. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying that through this spiritual experience where I connected with God and my ancestors, I learned that my fear of having children and that limiting my, let's say, my career path or my individual goals and achievement that I'm seeking, especially like in my art career, um, is ill-founded and not only not a complete idea to say that having kids would limit me, but I think the reverse is true now. Not so much as I'm going to have babies right now, because I still want to maybe be in a certain financial situation and have a little bit more consistency in my mural work and my career before I start a family. And plus, me and Amanda, it's still over a year away. Our marriage, our wedding is still over a year away. So first things first, and I think the things will come in due time. And she's 25, so we still have time, I think. But even in saying this, I hear a voice in my head that's like, that you're not putting your spiritual lessons and thoughts into practice. But I'm trying to find a happy medium here. But the encouragement from ayahuasca was that you don't have to do those things first. In fact, if you have children and you have a family, it might put you in a different gear. I'm talking about myself, to where I will be able to produce more and be working more efficiently, and I will have more of a sense of purpose that will drive me and give me more energy. Yes, my attention and time will be divided in order to raise a child, but at the same time, it could enhance my ability to earn, and it could enhance my career. I've heard a lot of parents say this, like babies bring abundance, and that's not necessarily maybe a reason to have children. You should only have children if you really truly feel called to do so. But the moral of the story of this first ayahuasca trip is that I do feel called to do so. And I think before this, I was somewhat on the fence. I mean, I have known since embarking on this romantic partnership with Amanda, specifically, that I was going to have to consider having children for her sake, because she made it very clear that being a mother was her calling. So I've been leaning towards that anyway, because I love her and I think that she is my partner in a spiritual sense. So I have come to terms with that already, but this has just given me that kind of extra boost, that extra push that I needed, I guess, spiritually, in order to actively plan for that and consider it more heavily and to work towards that. So I gained a huge respect for my own father because of this. I gained a huge respect for my own friends that are fathers. Ben Flowers, shout out to the Flowers family. I actually texted him the next day and was like, hey, dude, I fucking love you. Mad respect for doing what you're doing, because he's kind of the opposite of me, and has pursued that fatherhood role even ahead of his own career interest and personal interest. He's also an artist. So I don't know. I just increased the value that I place on those roles of parenthood, and I have increased my respect for my own parents. So, and also obviously my wife to be, Amanda, I see her in a totally different light after that experience, and it was really special because as everybody was leaving, like I said, I got started late in my experience. I was 2 cups deep before I really felt much of anything. And so I ended up taking every round of medicine offered. There's 3 rounds where medicine is offered, and I took 2.5 cups total. And so I was late to start, which means that it lasted longer. Like at the end of the ceremony, everybody kind of like gets up. There's this like water distribution ceremony where we all drink water, because the whole ceremony we were not drinking any water or consuming anything. Um, and I had to, like, everybody stands up at the end in the circle, and like I don't know if we like held hands or whatever, but we all stood up and like received a blessing from the shamans. And I was like one of 2 people that had to just continue laying down, because I was like out of it. I was still very much in it. And at the end of the ceremony, Amanda came over when she was done and was like on her way back to our room, and she like checked in on me and was very motherly, and just wanted to comfort me. And I just looked at her like in a complete amazement. I was like, holy shit, look at this woman. This is divine. So that was super special. And I'm glad I'm recording this just for the sake of remembering these moments, because I think I forget all too easily. And ayahuasca has a way of staying with you for a really long time and teaching you lessons well beyond the direct experience. And I think I needed this right now in my life in particular to reflect on this. And it was kind of serendipitous, because I went to a coffee shop this morning to work on a mural design, and I brought my journal just to journal. I hadn't done it in over a month. And the first page I opened to was ayahuasca, this experience that I just read to you. So I think that's divine. That wasn't an accident. So I don't know. I think there's probably more, but I'll have to come back to it at a future date. I kind of want to just get on with this, and this is already probably a really long podcast. So let me just read the next 2 excerpts from the next 2 experiences of ceremonies during that week. They're quite a bit shorter for sure, and maybe I'll review on those and touch on those. But if you have any questions, just ask in the comments or send me a message, because I would love to talk about this. And I think that there's plenty of content that I could create based around this experience. And my psychedelic experiences are not over. I think I will dive into that in the future as well, further, to try and learn more as I reflect and I grow and I age. So let me just chug some of this water. Holy shit, it's hard to talk for an hour. Woo! Okay. So here's where things get a little interesting. Remember how I said I didn't purge? Well, I did purge. I ended up sobbing whenever I thought about that memory of my father dropping me off at daycare, and that led into a series of realizations and knowledge that flew into me, which was profound. Like, it wasn't like I was just like remembering vague memories. It was as if I was there. I was kind of given this vision, which was kind of a gift, of me being in that daycare, and it was something that I've thought about since. Like, I've thought about that event in really vague, ambiguous circumstances and moments throughout my life since then, but this is like one of my first memories and one of the first like traumatic conscious memories I had was being at that daycare, my dad dropping me off, me feeling abandoned. Um, and it was something that I think I just wrote off. Like, I was like, that's not significant. I'm just being a bitch. Like, I'm pretty spoiled and privileged. So, like, that shouldn't be really traumatic. Like, every kid probably goes through that, and I kind of have written it off my whole life. But experiencing it in the way I did that ayahuasca showed me was quite a bit more meaningful and profound and kind of allowed me to feel that again. And I did. I cried probably harder than I have in decades. Just like tears running down my face, snot dripping out of my nose like a faucet. I'm not lying. Like, I probably went through at least a half of a roll of toilet paper just soaking up my tears and snot. So that was lovely. So I kind of got what I asked for and I purged. Um, and I thought that I had purged a lot that night through that. I yawned a lot of toots, a lot of snot, which are also versions of purging. Shivering is also another one. I shivered a lot. These are all just ways to purge. But the next day, I woke up after just like basically a short nap after the ceremony, because the ceremony ends at like maybe somewhere between 2 and 4 a.m. And I stayed at the flame until the sun came up, so like 6 a.m., maybe a little after 6:30. And that's when I returned to my room. But I wanted to get breakfast because I was really hungry, because I kind of fasted a little bit before that ceremony, so I was like super hungry the next morning. So I wanted to get to breakfast. So I just napped, woke up in time to get breakfast, and ate a bunch of food, and it was yummy. It was great. And then I also ate a big lunch. And then after lunch, we had this meeting where we would like go around the circle and kind of talk about our experiences, and kind of get some stuff out. And I like couldn't last like maybe 20 minutes in that meeting before I had to run back to my room. And that's when the real purging began. So that was quite lovely. Let me tell you about that. TMI warning, get the fuck out if you're queasy. So 3/7, so this is the next day. Well, I purged more around 3 p.m. yesterday. I ate too much between breakfast and lunch, as I said. Felt like shit during the family meeting and ended up leaving. Came back and was back and forth between shitting and bed, shivering uncontrollably. Ended up vomiting thick. It was mostly lunch and some oats. I don't know what that, I guess I had oatmeal. I don't know. Didn't think I wanted to participate in San Pedro today, but I do feel considerably better, so I think I will try it and maybe do 2 half cups. Also going to drink some electrolytes. Also, I remember seeing the big E, little e in the flames, which initiated thoughts of Dale. Generations aren't separate. There is overlap. We need each other. So that's the second entry. This was right before our second ceremony, which is San Pedro. San Pedro is a cactus medicine. I think it's similar to, I don't know what it's similar to, but it's supposed to be a heart opener. And so I was, the day before, so it was the ayahuasca ceremony the first night, or rather the second night, but it was the first ceremony. Then there was a day in between. That's when I was purging. Just, they call it double platinum. I was spewing out of both ends. It was fantastic. I remember there was a moment where I was literally spewing out of both ends, coming out my butt and vomiting into the trash can while I'm sitting on the toilet. It was great. It was so great. It was rough. But I was still grateful. I felt like I felt like I moved some stuff through me, not just the food. Also, for the record, this is maybe important to know. I had been doing a carnivore diet for much of the last almost, I would say probably like 4 to 6 months before going to Ecuador and this ceremony. But the ayahuasca diet protocol is to be more like a vegetarian. You're supposed to eat really bland foods. You're supposed to abstain from sex. You're supposed to not have any drugs, certainly no pharmaceutical, psychoactive drugs, no SSRIs or anything like that if you're going to participate in the ceremony. And then it's basically an alkaline diet, alkaline. So you're supposed to just eat like plantains and um, vegetables and just really like maybe rice, really bland foods. Certainly no meat, um, and even no fruit. I think, although we did eat fruit um, leading up to that, but it was like 2 weeks that we had to do that. So I went from carnivore to basically vegan for like 2 weeks leading up to this. So my gut microbiome was a mess, and I think that's probably part of the purge because while we were there, we were also eating basically a vegetarian diet um, at the retreat center. So that was wonky. My body definitely wasn't used to that, and I'm not about to talk about diet here, but it was just a shock to my system. So that was probably part of the reason of my discomfort, GI wise, and the shitting and the vomiting. I think that was a lot, but it was also probably the medicine purging me. Probably a mix of both. I talked about the big E, little e in that last journal entry, and I'm talking about my last initial, which is I cough. So I saw the logs and the flame were in the shape of a big E like this, but then the bottom of the big E, you see that? Was kind of like a little E as well. It wasn't like that. It was like kind of like that. And that was symbolic, and it made me think of the lineage of my father and the patriarchal line. I don't really know how to explain it without sounding crazy, but it was symbolic, and it kind of spurred all those thoughts about my dad. It was like one thing after another, and it was kind of magical. So anyway, the second ceremony we were supposed to participate in was the San Pedro, the cactus medicine, and I was, losing sleep. I didn't sleep hardly the night before that ceremony because I began purging at 2 p.m. the day between ceremonies, and I was basically up throughout the night. I think I stopped purging at like 4 a.m. So I maybe got like 2 hours of sleep before we had to get up and head into the village to do the second ceremony, the San Pedro. And this ceremony was going to be really long. It was going to be like a 24-hour ceremony from like 8 a.m. to the next morning. And so I was like, I don't know if I can do this. But I decided to just go get breakfast and give it a try and see how I felt. And I kind of just started to feel better over time. And I was like, I've come all this way. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do more drugs, more medicine. Um, and I did. I did take it light. I don't even really want to talk about the second ceremony because I didn't really have that much of a good experience. It wasn't really super negative, but essentially the layout of the ceremony was like we were all in the circle again, and the founder of the whole retreat center was the one who led this. She was the shaman. Her name was Christine. She was the shaman of this ceremony, the San Pedro, and basically the format was she had this magic carpet was what they called it, and she sat on one side of the fire, and everybody in the group would go up individually and talk to her and almost have like it's kind of like a therapy session. um, and she would ask you questions like, how did you lose your power, how do you plan to get your power back, or something like that. And it was basically just like a chance for you to kind of like divulge some negative experience in your life and kind of talk it out with her. And she was going to basically act as like a conduit or a vessel to maybe transmit some wisdom and help you through that. But it was in a group context, which is like kind of what I had. I already kind of have some issues with talk therapy. It's not that I think it's bad overall. I just don't think it's as good as people claim it to be. It's like kind of on a high pedestal right now in society. And this is not me saying that you shouldn't do it. I just haven't had the best experience with it. And I have heard horror stories about people overthinking. And that's certainly my problem. And I think that the danger of talk therapy is that you can put more energy into your problems than they necessarily deserve. Talking things out is definitely beneficial in the sense that you can think through things, get your emotions and energy out, and kind of purge those in a way. But I think that a lot of times, if not done properly, and therapists are just human beings, this is not against anybody personally. I think the best therapists and the best therapy is net positive. And this is not trying to talk anybody out of doing it. If you are having negative thoughts and have issues and trauma you need to work through, I recommend talk therapy. I just think it should come with a caveat of like, if it ends up being that your sessions lead to more negative thought and overthinking, and your therapist is pushing you in certain directions that maybe you didn't have to go. This is just for every individual to process on their own and think about. And I'm just saying this because I'm already kind of sensitive to that dynamic, and I have a tendency to overthink and to worry. And I think talk therapy overall is maybe not ideal for me in certain aspects. If I'm trying to work through specific traumas, for sure, I'm going to seek it out. But I'm only saying that because this whole ceremony of the San Pedro seemed to be very similar to a talk therapy session, but there's like 30 other people there. So like there's benefits to that because everybody in the circle has their hearts opened by the medicine, and everybody's empathizing and pouring energy to you, and in a way that kind of helps to transmit this energy through Christine, through the individual who's talking, and it allows them space, and it allows them to talk through their issues and their traumas in a way that is very safe and comforting and reassuring, and a very healthy environment to do so. But for me, it didn't really work that great. As I was sitting there listening to a bunch of people talk about their real problems, like really dramatic stuff, I felt guilty. I felt my issues in life and my traumas, I think, are very centered around the emotion of guilt and shame. And it got worse for me because I was listening to these people and their real problems, and I was like, well, I don't have any right to even be here. I don't even want to talk because I don't want to waste the time of the people who probably actually need this. Like, I'm privileged. I don't need to sit here and take up space. And that's not the right way to think. I know that. In fact, that's a lot of what my ceremonies were geared towards was, commanding space, not in a dominant way, but in a way of like, I deserve to be here. And I don't need to retreat to make others feel better. I deserve to take up space, and I deserve to consume and release energy for my own benefit and for others' benefit too. So I think part of my challenge was overcoming that, but I wasn't successful. And I ended up just getting up there when it was my turn, and like kind of bringing up my thoughts and my struggles, but it was like really vague. I wasn't being specific. And then Christine just kind of started rambling. I say rambling, that's not giving her enough credit. She was giving me really good advice, but it wasn't pinpointed to my actual issues, and it was kind of just like making my fears come to reality of like wasting time, I felt. And that's not anything against her. I blame myself because I wasn't clear, and I wasn't intentional enough in my expression to lead her in a direction that could actually help me. And so I just kind of bottled it up. I was like, well, I've already wasted too much time, and I don't want to interrupt her. And I don't know. It was mostly a negative experience for me, unfortunately. I'm not saying I wouldn't do it again. I think if I would do it again, I would be more direct, and I would be able to handle it better. But I was just in a weird state. Maybe it was because I was exhausted from the night before and just didn't have time for it. But the ceremony ended up being like 30 hours. It lasted until like maybe 10 the next day, like right before lunch. And I was like, Jesus. I was like kind of pissed off by the end of it because I just didn't have any energy. And I don't think I took enough of the medicine to like really be in it. Not that that was a mistake, because my body was probably already fragile because I took a lot of ayahuasca the 2 nights before and did all that purging. So like, I'm not saying I should have done more medicine, but maybe I should have, and maybe it would have made the experience better. I don't know. It's in the past. I think we should just move on because Amanda actually said she preferred the San Pedro. She said that she had better experience that time than in the ayahuasca. So I know it wasn't the same. And I know a lot of people said the same thing. A lot of people said that it was really fun, the San Pedro, but I think I just wasn't in the right mindset. I was being selfish, ironically, because I was trying to be selfless, and it just didn't work out for me. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm taking responsibility. But we're going to move on to the last day at Gaia Sagrada. This is 2 days after. So 2 days after the San Pedro ceremony when I had my last entry. This is my final entry at Gaia Sagrada. I'm just going to read it. Last day at Gaia Sagrada. What an experience. Had a wonderful trip last night. Mama Aya healed me while I sat on the toilet. She was a snaky Medusa witch doctor, and she revived my heart chakra. Then I asked her to heal my womb, and she did. I had some soft, ominous light shows to accompany her. She was a dark, stoic mass, but gentle and non-threatening. Half spacey, half indigenous. No vomit or poop, more toots, yawns, and shivering. Not drainage until one noseful at the end. I was coherent, but physically sedated, contemplative, hopeful, inspired to play music, learn some songs, buy a flute, bring down to the lake. Wichita do ya, Wichita do ya, hey. Wishatanea, heya heya, Wishatanea, heya hey. That was one of the songs that we sang, and I still sing it today. It's really fun. Inspired to get a 5-year plan together. Excited for Natalie's babies. That's my sister. Hoping to share this experience with my circle. San Pedro wasn't that cool. It was nice, but too long of a ceremony, and I didn't talk about what I wanted. Still got solid advice. Not into talk therapy in a group setting. Christine is a character. Glad I got a heart feather. Going to paint a mural today. It will be inspired by the shamans, Namur, the boss. What a powerful man and channel. Santiago, the jester, the heart of the ceremony. And of course, Fernando, the charmer and the spirit. Blessings to them all. Onward to Cuenca for coffee, meat, and sex. So that was my experience. Basically, the second ayahuasca ceremony was much more gentle, way less intense. But the difference was I put earplugs in as per recommendation of one of the other volunteers at the retreat center. And it really changed my experience for the better. It kind of dampened all of the purging sounds and the rustling and stuff of everybody around me and allowed me to focus a lot easier. And I was still able to hear the music through the earplugs, like the drums. I was still able to feel those, which was super impactful. And then I ended up just kind of laying there and closing my eyes. So I was super isolated and in my own world. And it was really awesome. It was very delightful and uplifting and very hopeful. Like I remember I saw a lot of visions of people in my life. I would think about somebody in my life, a friend or a family member, and I was able to envision how they could maximize their value in the world. I was able to just readily pull out kind of a path for them that they could follow to basically utilize their unique talents in order to also inspire the rest of the world. And that was kind of magical. Not that I expect anybody to do those things, but it was just really cool for myself to see the best in the people in my life. It was really magical, and I kind of fell in love with all my friends all over again, and I just kind of felt inspired to expand my own expression and use my voice. I felt really connected to the music. I grew up in musical theater, so music has always been a part of my life, but I kind of made a choice to pursue visual art instead of music or performing arts, and I don't regret that. Um, I wouldn't be doing this podcast and I wouldn't be talking to you right now if I hadn't done that. And I do still think that I'm going to paint forever. I think I'm always going to paint murals. I am feeling called to do that. But this ceremony really solidified the voice in my head that was giving me an alternative option to maybe pursue some other creative outlets, such as music, um, poetry, speaking. And so, really, that's why I'm here today, telling you this story, reading these journal entries, because it reminded me of this vision for myself, and that I think, truthfully, I have been limiting my reach by just focusing solely on visual art and painting and trying to get my art career off the ground and putting everything into that. I don't think it's a mistake, like I said. And it's funny because I have this tattooed, the flaming serpent, the burned serpent, because I feel very much that is a good symbol for me to be single-minded and focused on my mission. But I think my mission can have multiple assets and avenues to go towards the same goal, if that makes sense. Like, I'm really just here to provide the most service I can to the world, and I think that is through influence, through my creative thinking, not just in creating beautiful imagery and painting beautiful murals, but in my ability to have divergent thoughts and express them clearly and openly and be vulnerable in the way that I'm doing right now. So, having said that, I think I'm going to do more podcasts. I think I might even start another YouTube channel where I will not talk specifically about art and the creative lifestyle, but I will talk about some philosophies and some thoughts that I have and I reflect on, whether they be social, political, purely philosophical, spiritual, religious. Um, I don't know if that's exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, but I got to start somewhere and I need to just use my voice. That's the message. And I hope that's okay with you. If that sounds interesting to you, stay tuned. And my voice is starting to hurt. So I don't know if I know how to talk properly. I think I use too much vocal fry. I think I need to speak higher in my vocal range because I try to sound manly and talk lower. But I think that hurts my vocal cords because that's not how I'm supposed to talk. But that's just a thought. And I'm going to end this podcast now. I hope you gained something from it, whether this is serving as a call for you to experience Mama Aya for yourself or to just go inward in general. Maybe pick up that meditation process and connect with your higher self and to develop your spirit. I think that's a good idea. So this is your message. This is your calling for the day. Not that I have any right to do that or any authority. Take it as you will. Let me know what you think, and if anything rubbed your fur the wrong way, or if you found it helpful, let's get a conversation going. Okay, thanks for tuning in. Until next time.